Good afternoon and welcome to this roundtable session looking at the prospects for Ukraine's anti-corruption reforms. I'm John Luff, I'm an associate fellow with the Ukraine Forum, and I've been following the anti-corruption reforms in Ukraine closely over recent years. Our event really is a case of impeccable timing. When we designed it over 2 months ago, we had no idea that Ukraine's constitutional court would move to cancel the powers of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention. As a result of this ruling, the High Anti-Corruption Court has closed a number of cases related to asset disclosures, and some of its first convictions have been overturned. Some of the Constitutional Court's judges, I note, were themselves under investigation, and they had an obvious conflict of interest. So I think it's fair to say that this is a rather dramatic culmination of a steady fight back by forces in Ukraine that wish to preserve an old model of governance, one that's worked well for them. And as a result, the Zelenskyy presidency is in deep trouble. Relations with international partners have been damaged, and it really doesn't look as though Ukraine will receive any urgently needed IMF money anytime soon. The situation shows that Ukraine, in my view, has made progress in recent years in putting in place anti-corruption infrastructure and other measures that threaten these old interests. But it also shows at the same time the limitations of judicial reform so far. 4 of the Constitutional Court's current 15 judges were appointed before April 2014. Now, of course, Ukraine's anti-corruption efforts have not just been focused on building anti-corruption infrastructure. Transparency in public procurement, the cleanup of the banking sector, the cleanup of the energy sector, tax reform, all these things have been important parts of a broader approach to reducing the space for corrupt practices. And I think it's fair to say that some good progress was made in these areas after 2014. But the question now is what is the outlook? Are the anti-reformers' advances irreversible? What can the reformers do in response? So to help us find answers, we have an excellent panel. Unfortunately, Anastasia Radina, the chair of the Rada's Anti-Corruption Committee, is unable to join us. She is having to attend a meeting in the office of the president. So instead, at very short notice, we have Yaroslav Yuchishin, who is the first deputy head of the Anti-Corruption Committee, and formerly known to many of us as the executive director of Transparency International Ukraine. He is deputy chairman of the Holas party. Mikhail Jenikov is a former judge and one of the best known advocates of judicial reform in Ukraine. He runs the De Jure Foundation, and I think it's fair to say he is the most sartorially dressed of us today. Well done, Mikhailo. And finally, last but not least, Ekka Takeshieldishfield is the head of programs of the EU's anti-corruption initiative, and she brings remarkable experience of Georgia's reforms after the 2004 revolution. Ekka, if I remember rightly, was both Minister of Justice and then later Prosecutor General before serving as Georgia's foreign minister. Now, before we start with the presentations, just a couple of administrative items. This session is on the record. We are recording it. If you wish to ask a question, you have you have the option of either simply raising your Zoom hand, and I will try to call you, or alternatively, you can use the chat. So we'll start the presentations, please, with Yaroslav. Yaroslav, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for invitation. Really, I have a very short possibility to prepare for this discussion because really Anastasia in that moment finished our working group about our constitutional crisis, what we call that we have really in anti-corruption sphere, and after that have meeting in office of president about the same topic. So it showed that really Ukrainian power, first of all, of our majority, clearly understand that situation in anti-corruption sphere, it's not only situation in anti-corruption sphere. It's an answer, does Ukraine still want to be reformed? Want to be more deep in our Euro integration process, or we just pretend to do something and really what we done previously, it really just pretending to receive results. Now we have a very strange situation. Then new power, new government, who claimed that anti-corruption fighting it's one of the main goal, justice for everyone except access to that justice, it's one of the main goal of new team, really show controversial directly other situation in their working in process what they launch in Ukraine. On the beginning, after the election of new president, we have quite good situation when we renew illicit enrichment, when we start or just pretend to start of judicial reform, and our quite necessary decision we try to done in our parliament. But after beginning of coronavirus or COVID-19 crisis, after changing of our government from Goncharuk to Shmyhal, we see that situation change very strongly. Why? Because oligarchs or our financial industrial groups began to have bigger influence or highest influence when they have previously. Our government divided between different groups of oligarchs, and many really the necessariest reforms, for example, reform of justice was frozen directly. But it was only beginning. Its beginning was, I can see, on the beginning of 2020, maybe in March or April, but still it was like a borderline between pretending to do something or trying to do something and to really attack on all reform what we have. If we try to analyze what we have now, we have like end of Poroshenko time, because on the beginning after Revolution of Dignity, we have quite quick and transparent process of reforming, and the same situation we have in the spring and autumn of 2019. But after that, we see that all this process began stopped, or better say frozen, and many decisions try to relooked to rebuild in an appropriate way. Why? Because many of this reform began to show a result. For example, if in a period from 14 to 19, we don't have possibility to say that our National Agency for Prevention of Corruption are really working and show a good result. We rebuilt this institution with help of Ekka and her team in 2019, and to really see that we have possibility to prevent corruption, to stop our corrupt governments, not only in this process of investigation, but to stop some schemes, only then they start to be created. So prevention really can work and can show result. But what we have in the result of this working, we have decision of Constitutional Court that NACP don't have any possibility to check its declaration, to check conflict of interest and our very sensitive sphere of work of this institution. So we see that anti-corruption infrastructure began to show some results, not maybe the result what we want as democracy in transition. We really want everything in short period of time, and maybe it's one of the most challengeable thing for Ukrainians. So we want to have ideal situation or near ideal situation that we have in our Western partners, but with Ukrainian society and with Ukrainian government. But why we have these problems? First of all, it's our, I can't say mistake, but it's obstacle what we have on the time of Revolution of Dignity. We, after Yanukovych time, we received totally ruined and corrupt judiciary system. When we are looking back to the Viktor Yushchenko time, judges, first of all, Supreme Court or Constitutional Court really help to rebuild society and help to save some reforms, what we try to end revolution. But when Yanukovych come in power, so the first or the main what we try to do, ruin justice for everyone, ruin to system what we try to build. And all process of selection of judges, estimation of judges, all process what can help Ukraine to have appropriate justice in general was stopped and ruined in Yanukovych time. So when we have Revolution of Dignity, one of our main goal really is to create possibility of justice for everyone, or famous rule of law. Yes, what really one of the most necessary things for a liberal democracy. But we as civil society, and maybe it was our mistake, maybe it was like obstacle what we don't see on that time, we concentrate of anti-corruption, decentralization, but we don't have appropriate quantity of experts and specialists in the sphere of justice. So our justice reform was like postponed till 2016, 2017, but this time it was time long after revolution. So on that period of time, our government, even in time of Poroshenko, was not so open for society and tried to manipulate with some decision. As a result, we have totally politically, and not only politically, corruption-dependent justice system, what we have now. Public Integrity Council, what we create, it was really good idea, but judges ruined the possibility of this council to have real influence on decision of in process of selection, or public international expert council, what we have in selection process of selection of anti-corruption judges. Good example. We really could have better situation even in Supreme Court the best situation we have in anti-corruption courts, and this body still more open and more I can say have communication with society. Yes, Supreme High Anti-Corruption Court are better because in the process of creation of this court was more transparent and open than other body in judicial system. But we have old-fashioned constitutional court, in general old-fashioned, with conflict of interest, with groups, judges who was appointed in Yanukovych time and have really, I can see, very tough and very strong connection with Russia as a country who opened war against Ukraine. And in the end, many people, many oligarchs in Ukraine try to attack anti-corruption sphere, try to attack even some steps in the justice reforms. But through the parliament, they don't have possibility to stop these reforms. Why? Because now we have a situation when we don't have so professional parliament as we want, but still we have more pro-Ukrainian, pro-reformistic majority in our government. So oligarchs decide to use constitutional courts at our judicial system, and better about that will say Mikhail Jenikov. I think he more deep in this problem, and I really thanks the Jure, Antak, and our civic organization who control process and push us as parliament, parliament to do something in the sphere of judiciary. But our oligarchs using their affiliators in different courts to stop reforms or to save their own interest. For example, decision of courts which start procedure to returning of part of private bank to one of beneficiaries of these banks, Boголюбський, which was done yesterday, if I don't mistake. Or we have strange district administrative court of Kiev. This court can decide, for example, that Ministry of Health, Uliana Suprun, don't have possibility to be minister, or to do other even unpredictable decision, unconstitutional, unreality decision, because they decide to do that. So the main problem, what we have in anti-corruption sphere, it's oligarch-dependent judiciary. It's oligarch-dependent our court system. Why? Because through the parliament, through the open discussion, through the pushing from the side of civil society or our international partners on office of president, government, parliament, we can save anti-corruption structure. And not ideal, with some maybe small or big mistake in structure of anti-corruption infrastructure, but still working anti-corruption structure, which really push on oligarch interest, which try to show a result for Ukrainian society, and with some level of trust from the Ukrainian society, highest trust what we have for example, for our judiciary system. But still depending of judiciary system from the oligarchs and possibility of Russia to push on our judiciary system create the most dangerous situation for our anti-corruption structure. It's not like extraordinary situation. Really, we have the similar situation, for example, in Romania. There, through the Constitutional Court, was frozen possibility to Romanian NACP, Romanian National Agency, for prevention of corruption to do their work properly. But still, depending and lack of transparency in judiciary, the main problem for anti-corruption system now. All other problems we can solve. From our problem we can solve with help of our civic partners or our international partners. And really it was a great decision from EU side to create European anti-corruption initiatives who help us to repair NACP, who help us to save anti-corruption measures, for example, our e-declaration, and through the long period of time. But still, if now we have the most solid problem what we have previously, it's our judiciary. We don't trust to other judges, not for all, but for these judges who are responsible for decision of reforms, constitutional courts, some judges from Supreme Courts, high qualification commission of judges which still not exist in general, or high council of judges. And we really need not just urgent decision what we might now try to prepare in our working group, which have connection with constitutional reforms. And I hope we propose some decision. It will be not a strong decision. It will be like a compromise decision. Yes, we will have a criminal responsibility for lying in declaration, but still without like a tough responsibility. It will be like something small and not so influenced. We will return all possibility to NACP to work not only for checking declaration for government, for judges too, but still will create many obstacles to which will have connection with judges. And now we have a very deep, strange discussion that our constitutional justice are quite good and we don't need any decision in this sphere. So it's like when we in Ukraine want to not take decision, we really create a working group. So now we created working group about our constitutional crisis. So the main what we need really and what we really request for your help, it push on our government, motivate our government, motivate Office of President to launch a really reform in the sphere of selection of judges. And about it, I think better say Mikhail Jenikov. Thank you a lot.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yaroslav, for that comprehensive introduction. That's really helpful to get us started. I'm aware that you are going to have to leave us at 5 o'clock your time. So if you can stay with us, we'll come back to you. But I want to move now to Mikhailo. We've got a nice sort of entry point there to give us his view on where things stand and what the future looks like. Mikhailo, over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity. Very happy to be here virtually. I hope I'm not breaking any dress code with what I'm wearing, and I really hope I will sound as smart as I look. Let's try. Well. First of all, I have to agree with everything that Yaroslav said. Very, very nicely done. Really, there are clear signs that the system, the anti-corruption infrastructure that Ukraine built ever since the Revolution of Dignity, really starting now to threaten the existing status quo, to threaten the oligarchs themselves, to threaten their funds, and everything. So that is why they are fighting back, and this is the manifestation of it. As a very famous person, or infamous, so to say, in Ukraine, Mr. Pavlovov, the head of the notorious District Administrative Court of Kiev that Yaroslav mentioned, as he said on the tapes that were released by NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, he said, "Police is our friend," talking to his fellow judges. "SBU is our friends, but NABU is not our friend. They're just walking around, always trying to to get their hands on something and to find some information about us. So it is clear that even talking with each other, the representatives of the corrupt judiciary are recognizing that the new elements of anti-corruption infrastructure is a threat. But also, let's be clear, it's not only the manifestation of the corrupt elites fighting back, it is also clear that Russia is weaponizing corruption and the absence or the weaknesses of the institutions to really try and dismantle the whole Ukrainian state and the cooperation between Ukraine and the Western world. Obviously, the decision was unlawful, but I think that everybody already we're past that. There's no need to explain that further. It's not motivated. It exceeds the scope of the submission. But also, it is clear that the judges are connected to the Russian Federation. It is clear that the Constitutional Court as an institution is captured and has to be dealt with in a manner recognizing that it is in fact captured by oligarchs and by pro-Russian or Russian forces. Also, I have to repeat what Yaroslav said. There's no easy and quick and sustainable solution that would be constitutional and that would not deepen the crisis. However, there are three things that should be done in order to deal with the crisis. A is to stop the Constitutional Court from dismantling the reforms and the other laws that the court is considering at the moment. And it is now only because 4 judges refused to take part in the sittings of the court. There's no quorum. And today we got the news that the Congress of Judges that would elect a new member and unblock the court was postponed, luckily. And it's good that it was. But it's still very risky, and it just lacks one judge to change their position, to just not vote for anything, just come to a sitting of the court, and any further decision is possible on dismantling the anti-corruption court, lustration law, language law, land reform law, all these laws that are threatened, and let alone the system of the guarantees of basically the banking system that would just kill the financial system of the country. So we have to first block further attempts at dismantling this by raising the quorum or the number of votes necessary to adopt a decision to 15 or 16 or 17. That doesn't matter really. To win time and to do the most important thing, to introduce a real competition procedure, so the new judges will be selected, like the Constitution says, in a competitive manner, and they should be checked whether they have high moral values and are the lawyers of recognized competence, as the Constitution says. Now, the Constitution requires that, but there's no procedure in the law that sets these rules and this competition. Already there are 3 vacancies in the court. One more judge, the presiding judge in this case, he submitted his resignation, but that was not yet accepted by the judges. If they do accept that, we already have 4 vacancies in addition to 4 members of the court that did not vote for this decision. So if the system is introduced, already we will have almost a half of good judges in a couple months' time. And thirdly, we have to rebuild the anti-corruption infrastructure, obviously. And there's a whole lot of issues over there, but I will not stop there since I'm not an expert on the anti-corruption infrastructure, rather the judicial reform. Which again, and I have to agree again here with Yaroslav, that comprehensive judicial reform is required. Because even in the best case scenario, if we do the best that we can with the Constitutional Court, if the rest of the judiciary stays the same, it will just eventually this evil judicial empire will strike back and regain control over the Constitutional Court. at least three other institutions have to be relaunched or rebuilt. It is the High Council of Justice, the High Qualification Commission, and the District Administrative Court of Kiev. And the good example here that can be scaled and a good success story is the selection of the anti-corruption court judges. So the element of the independent international experts in selecting or rebooting these institutions is crucial here, that we think. And very importantly, I think one mistake that we all made in the previous attempts at judicial reform is treating Ukraine's judges as if they were really judges in the understanding of, Western civilized world. What they are really now is a criminal syndicate, and they should be treated as such. And you don't treat criminal syndicate, and you don't solve the problem of that by giving the criminal organization more self-governance or more independence or more trainings. It just doesn't work like this. They have to be investigated. They have to be punished. They have to be. There has to be a system in place that takes these corrupt judges that lack integrity and professionalism out of the system. That is why it's so important to reboot these judicial governance bodies, and finally fill the vacancies with the new competitive, clear, transparent selections. I think I'll end. Yes, right now, which is very important. Right now, there is kind of a hysteria that is propelled by the representatives of the judiciary itself that will lack 2,000 judges in the system. Why 2,000? Nobody knows that. But we have to absolutely appoint 2,000 new judges, otherwise the system will collapse or whatever. The system already has collapsed. The system already doesn't do what it's needed from it. But it is not the quantity of the judges, it is the quality of the judges that is the problem. So we have to first reboot these judicial governance bodies and then fill in the vacancies, because if we continue hiring the judges under the same rules that led to this outcome, we will be 2,000 judges backwards. It will be catastrophic to hire 2,000 new judges under current rules or under the rules that led to this outcome. And obviously, yes, we do need your help, the international community. It is clear now that it's unpredictable. It is harder to achieve reforms. Sometimes it's more kind of preventing backslide rather or repairing the damage or other things rather than advancing the reforms. But that means we just need not less but more support from the international community and really conditioning and pushing these reboot of the institutions and the judicial reform that is very badly needed. Thank you. I'll stop here, and of course I will be very happy to take any questions.
Okay, Mikhail, thank you very much. It's extremely clear and to the point. Can I just ask you a couple of very small follow-up questions of a technical nature? Firstly, how do you raise the quorum in the Constitutional Court? Surely the Constitutional Court judges have to decide that themselves. So there is
by changes to the law. That's the short answer. The longer version is we're lucky that the number of the votes that are needed to adopt a decision are not entrenched in the Constitution. Is not entrenched in the Constitution. So it is only by the ordinary law. So we can say now they have 11 judges in the court ready to vote for anything. What we need is to raise this bar to, I don't know, 15 as the current number of the Constitutional Court judges. So they would have to include those 4 who had the different opinion. And if they have a consensus, very well, they let them come up with a good decision, a consensual one. But they will not have this majority or even the 2/3 majority. So they would need only one more judge. If there's some proposals in the RADA that say, okay, let's make it 12. It won't help because they only will need one more to continue doing what they're doing. So that is, it just needs one line in the change in the law, change 10 to 15, and that's it.
Okay. And my second question is, who currently oversees the process for nominating and appointing judges? Which body manages that? Sorry, of the Constitutional Court judges.
Right, yeah. According to the Constitution, it's 18 judges and maximum, and each body, the president, the parliament, and the Congress of Judges appoints 6 members. Also, the Constitution says it is done in a competitive manner, and the judges will have to be of high moral values and should be lawyers of recognized competence. Now, that's in the Constitution. There is no procedure, basically there's no procedure in the law that says what is the commission, what are the procedures, how the morality and the competence are checked, and so on and so forth. And it comes to the point where just a couple of weeks ago, the Rada was considering some of the candidates for their quota, because they're trying now to fill in the vacancies before the new rules are introduced, unfortunately. And this is very dangerous. But they were voting for one of the candidates who graduated from the legal school 6 years ago, even though the Constitution provides that it should be at least 15, they should have at least 15 years of legal experience. So that they failed, the committee of the Rada that is officially in charge of the contest failed even to check the formal requirements of the candidates. That's how bad it is at the moment, let alone the high moral values or whatever it is. There is just no way that it's checked. The integrity, there's issues with integrity, with the property, nobody's checking that. So it has to be introduced. There has to be a panel that has very preferably with international experts or the Ukrainian experts delegated by the international organizations, and with reputable Ukrainian experts, and with procedures and with transparency and with all that. We've been through that with the anti-corruption court. Ekka knows very well about this, and I think many people do. And it's a system that has to be scaled, and I don't see why and how it is not yet there.
Okay, thank you. As you say, that's an important precedent that Ukraine has there with the formation of the High Anti-Corruption Court. Could we move now to Ekka, please? Ekka.
Sorry, John. I think Volodymyr Dobrovsky. I don't know if you're getting that, but I think he's.
Yeah. No, we'll come. Okay. I saw that.
Okay.
We'll come to you at the end. Okay. We'll take questions at the end. Okay. Super. Ekka, please.
Sure. Thank you, John. I'll try to be brief and precise as much as I can be, and I'll start with echoing some of the assessments that our previous speakers, Mikhailo, and then mentioned as well. That and start with this. What is happening now in Ukraine shall not be a surprise, I guess, to anyone. And then partly, and maybe the main argument for that is that because the system started to work. And it has been mentioned already, but I wanted to spell out what it means when we speak that system started to work. It has been a very, very difficult ride for all anti-corruption specialized agencies to come to the point that what they could deliver. And it took a lot of effort from their side to build institutions to the degree that they could effectively lead investigations, prosecutions, and then for the court to start to deliver as well, which is a very young organization, as we all know. It only has 1 year so far, a bit more of its existence. So that when we speak about anti-corruption agencies, it is important to keep that in mind, that they are really young, and it took a lot of effort from their side, commitment and resilience to be at the point when it is widely acknowledged that they do their job well when it comes to the work that they do as professionals, that they cannot be bribed, they cannot be negotiated with, and by that they have managed to create that sense of predictability, in a good sense of that predictability, that if they work, they do their best with the high level of commitment to deliver, and they cannot be bribed once again, and they cannot be negotiated with. And then by the creation of High Anti-Corruption Court, system became complete when it comes to the criminal justice on anti-corruption cases. And that became the final signal for interest groups to understand that it is a system that is threatening to them. But threats, a perception of threats, and then attacks that were result of that perception did not start only now. It's just a full frontal attack, what we see now on the anti-corruption infrastructure. But other than that, continuously, we've seen different attempts of downscaling the possibilities of their activities, taking out some elements of the toolboxes they had at hand for fighting corruption effectively. Illicit enrichment related provisions were the first signs how the Constitutional Court acted in vis-a-vis anti-corruption infrastructure in Ukraine, and that happened already a year ago or more. So in that regard, as much as it is a challenge, it is a sign of success as well for anti-corruption agencies, for all those who have been engaged in building up these institutions. But having said that, part of the acknowledgement of mistakes, perhaps of the lessons learned that we need to reflect at this moment, is that whether or not the narrative, the concept of what anti-corruption reforms meant was a proper one. It seems to me now, looking in retrospect, that anti-corruption institutions and anti-corruption infrastructure became the motto, so to say, the focal point of what anti-corruption reforms meant, or who anti-corruption champions were meant to be, with all the responsibilities entrusted on them as well. And while anti-corruption institutions are meant to play a pivotal role in the process, they are accelerators of the overall reforms. Anti-corruption specialized bodies in the country, which has a systemic problem of corruption, cannot be deemed as the sole responsibility bearers, so to say, of the success of anti-corruption reforms, which are cross-sectoral in so many ways. And it's not just separately sectoral reforms, judicial reform, administrative reform, decentralization. It's the whole of the government way of looking into anti-corruption that should have been the premise of the narrative, that that's how anti-corruption reforms are about to be proceeded in the country. And anti-corruption infrastructure had to be looked at for public perception as well, not only internally politically, as the focal point, as an accelerator of the reforms that would create early on, before the rest of the institutions would reform, a predictability of equal application of law, irrespective of who you are, how high your position is, and then predictability of what the rule of law per se in the future in the country should have been. What is the result of that misperception, perhaps on a conceptual level, is that there is relatively, I would say, I don't want to say low level of public trust now towards anti-corruption institutions, but a successfully waged war against anti-corruption institutions in the public domain by interest groups who own most of the big media outlets in Ukraine. Because what happened with that image of having the anti-corruption champions who had to deliver all of the anti-corruption reforms in the country as if, is that when the society and ordinary citizens did have the chance to feel tangibly so far the results of so many reforms at their level, it is easy to manipulate with the opinion that nothing is done. So all of the successes that have appeared, not only in anti-corruption field, but in sectoral dimensions as well. And then, John, you mentioned some of it in the banking sector, in the energy, in the procurement, now in the field of privatization. The list is quite impressive in that regard, to be honest. But it is lost in the overall narrative of what is it that cumulatively has been achieved that an ordinary Ukrainian anywhere in Ukraine, in Kiev or in the region, in a small village, could have felt that the change was brought to his or her life at an everyday life level, so to say. So part of that is a lessons learned, so to say, that we all have to reflect upon, on how to destroy this cluster of anti-corruption in the perception, and then have the approach that anti-corruption is an intertwined element, mainstream element of fundamental changes and reforms across the sectors. When we speak about the judicial reform, for example, it's not just the sectoral reform in judiciary, it's the foundational premise of what the rule of law in the country could be. And that's how anti-corruption reforms are pursued in this country, above and in addition to what high anti-corruption court can deliver as a separate institution on specific category of anti-corruption related cases. And without holistic approach to the future in that regard, we might be still somehow trapped into that battle for the public opinion, which is extremely needed in any democracy. And Ukraine is a democracy where electorate decides the future of the political class, and then who is elected in the decision-making positions. And fighting for the mindset, for understanding of public, of Ukrainian citizens, is as equally important, I would say, as the actions that have to be directed at the changes in this regard. I'm not promulgating the full concentration of the public communication or public awareness, but then having more holistic approach to it so that the message needs to be delivered. What could be the practical implication of the way into the future, so to say, and I'll expand a bit more on that, is that beyond the sustainability of what is already achieved, more ambitious agenda is needed in the areas where quick wins could be contemplated in such a ways that public could see the change of what the reform deliverables are, so that they can build on it, support it, and fight back with the agendas that are quite intensely and proactively worked at, including by the northern neighbor in Ukraine, as it has been already said, as a weaponization, so to say, in the hybrid war that is waged against Ukraine in that regard. Now, when it comes to the areas that are in short term critical, they all have been mentioned already. It's partly could be branded under the chapeau of sustainability of the achievements in anti-corruption field. And that means restoration of the powers that NACP as an institution had for the transparency and accountability reasons, maintaining the legitimacy, powers, and independence of NABU as well, as a result of the Constitutional Court's decision. Independent, transparent, and merit-based selection of the new head of SAPO, extremely important direction in this field as well. And then maintaining the existence of the High Anti-Corruption Court, of course, which has been one of the strong deliverables in this field, which actually made the whole system complete, as we've said. But beyond that, when it comes to what are the issues that needs to be put in as part of anti-corruption agenda, I'm a strong believer myself of broadening up that agenda of what anti-corruption means for Ukraine and how much the reforms that have to be creating the equal play field for the businesses when it comes to the rules in the economic field, when it comes to the application of the rules, either by law enforcement or by the fiscal authorities, or by customs or judiciary at the end of the day. If the dispute goes to the court, then these are the areas in which progress is needed. Otherwise, the sustainability of the results will be difficult to be perceived. And where we are now in Ukraine, I see it from both angles, and quite a bit from the positive angle as well, because what it shows is that Ukraine reached the momentum of a crossroad when another stage of that battle approached. And then if it goes successfully through the mobilization, primarily of the internal resources of civic organizations, of the political spectrum, it can come out stronger out of that. But the scenario of backsliding is obviously a possibility as well. So it's not an inevitability of backsliding, but rather an opportunity that I would encourage to look into as of now, into what Ukraine can be with more ambitious agenda in anti-corruption field, which can be broader in the perception of the public eye and political spectrum of what that would mean for the country beyond the specific sector of specialized anti-corruption bodies per se. How we can help in this direction? Part of it obviously is continuation vigorously of the assistance, as it has been the case, of building up the institutions that are pivotal for the state building process in Ukraine, for effectively fighting back all the battles that Ukraine is fighting now, external or internal in that regard, and then mobilization of resources in time so that when assistance is needed and the assistance that is needed now is delivered now. And that has been a guiding principle in so many ways now for the assistance that is delivered by the European Union, by the Danish government. And it's just needless to mention, but it still needs to be highlighted. But for members of the European Union and for Denmark particularly, for example, Ukraine and Georgia are the two countries that are the key countries in this neighborhood to assist. So the importance of what it means to assist Ukraine is very strong. And then resources are dedicated sufficiently for that. All we need is openness to utilize the resources and assistance that could come and then assist Ukrainian authorities. And finally, when it comes to how external actors could help in this very important, essential fight of Ukraine, to close the loopholes that are related to dirty money, so to say, if one is very short in the description of that. And we see very interesting developments at the level of the EU, at the level of the member states, now not the member state, but then UK as a European country, and then a greater anticipation of what it can be now with the whole focus on democracy and development of democratic governance from the new administration of the US as well. So factors could be aligning well to see that this enormous resource that is used by interest groups in leveraging it back for maintaining the schemes through which they don't only enrich themselves, but then maintaining the controlling factor or leveraging factor against Ukrainian stakeholders on the ground, not only government, but beyond, and media and sometimes even public organizations, then closing those loopholes and fighting back effectively externally as well against corrupt money and dirty money is a way of helping Ukraine, is a way of helping effectively internationally as well, obviously, to fight back with the effects of corruption and weaponizing of corruption for interfering into the domestic democratic environments of many democratic countries. It became the case now from actors that use it quite so far, I would say, effectively. So in that regard, approach could be two ways: help internally, but then help externally as well through the ways that could be very effective in helping our Ukrainian friends and colleagues to be more successful in fighting the battle inside Ukraine by building their national institutions, making them effective and efficient, and be not only hopeful, but confident that Ukraine will come out of this very challenging crossroad stronger, rather than be disillusioned that it is a moment when it showed that everything is futile, nothing can be done, and then just complain about it. We are not at that moment. Success is the result why we're here in this extremely challenging crossroad, but more actions are needed to come out stronger out of the challenge.
Thank you very much, Ekka. You've packed a lot into a very short space of time. That's really, really useful to focus minds. I'm aware that Yaroslav has to leave us in a couple of minutes. Yaroslav, is there anything you'd like to say in response before you go?
Yes, only one reaction on the position of Mikhail Jenikov about situation in Constitutional Court. We have totally politically dependent Constitutional Court. It's not responsible for our Constitution, because Constitution really demand from us appropriate transparency selection process. But still, we even don't have discussion about that. In our working group, we postponed question about Constitutional Court to the end. So I think we will not have any decision for that. Without public pressure, without public motivating from the side of civil society, I see that we still will have a politically dependent constitutional, not court, but groups. Because many of people who have connection with different political party, better say owner of political party, will decide what is constitutional for Ukraine and what not. It's situation what we have as a compromise in the sphere of construction of our constitutional judiciary, but it's very dangerous for country, because we have several crises which was started in Constitutional Court. It's crisis about constitution of Yanukovych time. It's crisis about third term of Kuchma. So, and after this decision, every time we have protest, we have revolution, Orange Revolution, or Revolution of Dignity. So really reforming of our constitutional justice, it's a very necessary things, and we must to set up it in our public communication. I couldn't say that it's can be used by our international partner, because it's constitutional structure of Ukraine, it's our sovereignty, but still we really need more deep discussion in Ukraine.
Excellent. Yaroslav, thank you very much. We'll leave you to go to where you need to get to, but thank you very much for joining us. It was very good of you to fill in at short notice. So all the best. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
We have a couple of raised hands, and I'm going to take them in the order that they came. First of all, Vladimir Dubrovsky. Vladimir, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hello to everybody. Hi, John.
Hi.
And first of all, I would like to focus on the problem. How did we get there? 2 years ago, we published with you a paper, which I strongly recommend everybody to read. And I will not repeat our conclusions and implications, but just recommend you to reread this paper. Everything what happens now was predicted 2 years ago. And it was predictable because this is a sort of fighting between David and Goliath. And of course, if David wants to find Goliath in the arm wrestling, it will lose. Some smarter strategy is needed. But so far, what I see, unfortunately, that sort of judo that we should have been used against the enemy was used against us, because the West put too strong a bet on the anti-corruption fighting, or sort of arm wrestling fighting, sumo fighting, and this bet was wrong from the very beginning. I would not say that all of these efforts were futile or they were unnecessary. No way. Of course, they were needed, and I will strongly support it, creating of the NABU. And now I think that everything what have been destroyed by the Constitutional Court should be restored as soon as possible. But the very bet, the very emphasis that was made on this was a mistake, because it became a focal point for the forces that would like to break up Ukraine with the West. And it is a very vulnerable point, because in fact there are many flaws in this approach that we have already discussed in our paper, and maybe it is not flawless legally. Here I cannot judge, but I think there is. I'm sorry. I suspect there is something in it when the Constitutional Court says that it contradicts to the preemption of innocence and so on. But okay, this is not my topic. I will not judge here. But anyway, it was not just fighting back against the anti-corruption efforts. It was, if you look broadly, an effort to break up Ukraine with the West, because if you look at the names of the MPs that signed this appeal to the Constitutional Court, this is opposition. This is the pro-Russian force that is managed from Kremlin. And of course, they are not so much afraid of corruption per se, or anti-corruption per se, that they are afraid of Ukraine going into the West. And Kolomoisky joined them just because of the same reason, because he is now persecuted at the West, and he is now actually taking a pro-Russian stance. And so it became a very vulnerable point in the much wider and much more important thing than even anti-corruption per se is. So I would say that we need now to hold on, to use this moment to rethink the approach, the whole approach, to take more ambitious goal, as Yaroslav said, of establishing the rule of law rather than just fighting corruption, and at the same time taking a smarter, maybe not so brave, maybe not so popular, but more effective approach to achievement of this goal. As I said, when we presented our work, this is not a wise idea to corner a bear with a falling gun and trying to shoot it, because you have only the falling gun. You don't have Kalashnikov. If you have Kalashnikov, of course, it would be very good, emotional, brave, and so on to corner a bear and shoot him to death. But if you have only a falling gun, as we now do, you can just appear very brave, appear very popular, appear very, generous in some sense, but you will be killed by the bear. Because
Vladimir, I'm going to cut you off there if you don't mind, because we've got several other people. But
yes, I'm just about to finish. So we should, if we cannot change the whole falling gun for Kalashnikov, we need to change our strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The paper that Vladimir is referring to is one that he and I co-authored. It appeared almost exactly 2 years ago. The title was "Are Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Reforms Working?" And I think I would agree that the analysis has largely held quite well over the last 2 years. Next question. Ekka,
can I make a small clarification, just as a response perhaps to what has been said? Just for our viewers, for international community in that regard, there was never a choice as if anti-corruption reforms are more of a priority rather than rule of law related or justice related reforms. We are just talking today about anti-corruption reforms, but when it comes to the resources, when it comes to the political capital that has been spent on that, there has been an equal distribution in all directions, so that there has never been a perception or a strategic decision that anti-corruption reforms are number one priority per se, and then rule of law and justice related reforms are not. It's just when it comes to sequencing of some of the reforms and efforts internally from the Ukrainian side, there could have been differences in terms of when and how and what has been developed, but it has never been the case. And then it is not a strategic approach to that. It's a wrong assessment in that regard of what it was and what it will be, I'm sure, in the future.
And if I may also very shortly reflect on that, I really wished we would not again raise the discussion what is better to create the framework of the criminal accountability and liability for corrupt wrongdoings or other anti-corruption efforts. It is the same discussion as what would you like some tea with tea leaves or hot water? It's both. You have to do everything. You have to. It's equally important. I don't see. It's not contradictory. And really, as a lawyer, as a former judge, I can't really see how any anti-corruption reforms, especially in the judiciary, any anti-corruption efforts would work without the working system of the criminal accountability and bringing criminals to criminal justice. So I really would we please agree on that and not try to not I don't know how to say it. Really, I wish we constructively work on the whole reforms that have to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikhail, for that, and Ekka for those clarifications. I'm going to turn now, please, to Mattia Nellis. Mattia.
Right, thank you, John. Thank you. Fantastic discussion. I'm Mattia from the Center for Liberal Modernity. And we have done discussions like this before with the Ukrainian Parliament in September and in October. So this is a timely discussion. I just want to underline. And what is important is the first point. In Germany, we've talked with a lot of politicians to make them understand what the problem is, because we love our courts, and as Mikhail was calling it, criminal syndicate, right? This understanding has not yet fully reached all of the decision makers that it need to in Germany. So these discussions are important to make them understand that the court is essentially a loose cannon, potentially undermining not just the anti-corruption infrastructure, but all the other reform gains. So this is a very important point that we need to re-emphasize every time we address the issue. But I want to touch 2 points, or ask about 2 points that were touched upon in the discussion about NABU, because the Constitutional Court has, of course, ruled or handed down 2 rulings regarding the NABU and gave basically the rather 3-month time period to fix the constitutionality of the appointment or the law, do changes in the NABU law, or else ... or else what? What happens if the Rada is inactive and doesn't comply with this ruling? Will the work of the NABU, how will it be affected? And lastly, the SAPO, Ekka touched upon the SAPO, the selection process of the SAPO. So we all know that there were some questionable individuals appointed to the selection committee, but maybe Mikhailo, you can update us on the status of the specialized anti-corruption prosecutor, because he, of course, holds a key position in the architecture. So if we appoint the wrong person there, then even the best NABU can do nothing, or the high anti-corruption court. So maybe you can update us on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mattia. Absolutely, I can't agree more. Well, on the same point that I was. But thank you for pointing this out, that it has to be repeated. Really, we're working on this right now, because it is important. As for the SAPO, we're not experts on the prosecution, so maybe I would ask, maybe if Ekka wants to reflect on that, I'll pass it to her.
Sure. Quickly on SAPO, commission is already formed, as you are well aware. I can say that from your question. It's a composition in which we have several members which were appointed by the Council of the Prosecutors, which are globally renowned as experts in the field of anti-corruption and judiciary. And Ukraine is lucky, I would say, that people of this caliber and occupancy are ready to dedicate their time quite extensively to the work that they do in the commission. It's a laborious job, and then we're very grateful for them that they are ready to do so for the best interest of the country and for the best interest of this processes. When it comes to the support that is given to this process, because now it comes to the point how the commission will work and what will be the rules of procedure, decision-making processes, methods, so that it is indeed a transparent, merit-based process that assures that the best candidate wins when it comes to the head of the SAPO. And by the way, the vacancies are open for the deputy's position and then head of the department's position as well, unit. So it's a very, very complex and very important process. We've been engaged from the side of UICI with our partners from the side of the technical assistance programs from the US in the selection processes, both of HACC, High Anti-Corruption Court, and the selection process of the head of the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption. All of the experience that have been gained with the successfully run processes as they were in these two occasions already fed in, so to say, and reflected in the process how a working group that has been created as a secretariat by the Prosecutor General's office will be assisting the commission. A process will not be easy. There are differences of the view among the members of the commission, but then the reassuring factor is that the commission itself made a decision that the decisions will be made by the following rule, 5+2, which means that at least 2 members out of the 4 members that were selected by the Council of the Prosecutors will be part of the decision-making process. And it was a common decision in which both sides, so to say, said that we are one commission, and then no side of the commission could be marginalized, because if it would have been a simple majority, one could have easily guessed what could have been the result of that. So we are ready to support this process. We are helping it together with our colleagues from an American side. It's an organization called IDLO that is helping in this process. We've had a good experience of working together during the selection process of HACC. So we're ready to provide support. All the experiences and resources that have been gained that we understand will be needed to this process will be provided to this process. And it's up to the Commission to utilize that so that we get it as the ultimate decision. What I can say from the side of the EU, it is seen as an essential component of the microfinancial related aid to Ukraine as well. So the importance of SAPO is not underestimated, both internally and externally, I would say. And on NABU's legislation, it's an extremely important question. There are differences of the view legally what it would entail. One can say that when it comes to NABU continuing as an investigative body, some of the key functions they could continue to act upon if there is nothing adopted by the parliament, but under the very risky legal terrain, so to say, very, very volatile in that regard. So the message that is shared by many is that there needs to be legislative action, at least an intermediary, if not the final legal action that could define all of the issues, but it needs to be still the preferred option is comprehensive solution of this issue, because it will be very risky to have anything unclear in terms of the legal framework under which this very important institution could operate with. And no action from the parliament could certainly pose those risks.
Okay, thank you. Ekka, just a very brief follow-up. The appointment of Nazar Kholodnitsky, the former special anti-corruption prosecutor, back in what must have been 2015, was the procedure then significantly different?
Procedure was not different. In this case, the procedure itself has not changed. It's the same formula. 4 members are appointed by the prosecution side. At the time, it was the prosecutor general, because the council was not at place. Now it's the collegial body of a self-government of prosecution that appoints the members of the commission, and majority of the commission, 7 out of 11, are appointed by the parliament. So the equation is the same, general provisions are the same, but the commission itself is an architect of its own rules of procedures and methodologies that needs to be applied. And in that regard, Ukraine has come far further in terms of selection processes and mechanics and methodologies of that than it was at that time. So how one can assess the integrity of the candidates, what could be the ways of assessment of the professional qualifications. There is much more experience and better techniques that could be used, and we would hope that will be used in this case as well, so that ultimately we will make the best result out of this very important selection process.
Yeah, understood. I think it's fair to say that the Kholodnitsky appointment was not particularly successful, but that's a strictly personal view. Moving on, I see Ian Bond with a hand raised. Ian, please.
Hi, John. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I mean, the first is, I think there is rightly quite a high bar to politicians sacking judges, but obviously in this case there are very good reasons for doing it. But I wondered whether there was any involvement on the part of the Venice Commission in particular in trying to devise procedures that would make it okay to get rid of judges this time around, but not create incentives for future presidents and future formations of the Rada to do this on a purely political basis in the future. So, you know, is there any kind of structure for ensuring that what is done on the basis of purely objective criteria and not anything political? And the second question, which I guess is primarily directed at Ekka, is, I mean, apart from the kind of conditionality that you've spoken of in relation to the EU, is there anything else more directly that the EU could be doing through secondments or attachments or any other involvement that would help to move this process forward? Because, you know, my slight concern with the conditionality is that it ends up not harming the interests of the corrupt, but harming the interests of the country.
Thank you, Ian. Great questions. First one, Mikhail, do you want to take that?
Yes, thank you, John. There's been talks between the Venice Commission and our government. First of all, when the initial president's response to the current crisis appeared, when he said that obviously the court is influenced from the outside, and he called the NSDC, and then he proposed the draft law that says basically all the constitutional court members are sacked and the new ones have to be selected, which is obviously unconstitutional. Like, the president cannot do that and the parliament cannot do that. And in our view, that would only deepen the constitutional crisis, doing more unconstitutional things. Even though the government's response, we think, was adequate when it decided to not really implement the decision, at least in the part where it would close, or basically close, the electronic asset declaration system from the public eye and stop the management by the NABU of the said electronic asset declaration system. But so when this proposal appeared, the Venice Commission president Gianni Buchicchio and the Greco president, they wrote a joint letter to Zelenskyy, pointing out that basically this is not the way to go. This is clearly unconstitutional, and the way out of the crisis should be in the respect for the constitution and for the rule of law. Then recently, it was in the news that the president had a talk with Gianni Buchicchio, with the president of the Venice Commission, and President Zelenskyy asked for their advice and assistance in getting out of the constitutional crisis. There was no more details on that. It's not the primary goal of the or function of the Venice Commission actually to do those things, but we're trying to gather now and to also understand what is the dynamic there, but there's little information on that yet. When it comes to, yes, to the renewal of the judges, again, our joint view by the civil society, we see no other way than to introduce the good competitive selection procedure that is already required by the constitution, but it's not in the law. It's not. The law just says, oh, for the Rada, it is the legal committee of the parliament. For the president, he can do whatever the commission he can, and the Congress of Judges, they also, there's no competition right now. So we think when and if there is a panel with reputable experts, there is criteria, when it's all done publicly, when there's international experts involved, or at least international observers, when it is open for everybody, and like right now, you should not be connected with any one of the factions of the parliament, at least one, because the rules of procedure of the Rada now say that the candidates to this contest to this competition are introduced by the factions of the parliament only. So it's just absurd that in a competitive selection you have to be already politically connected with at least one of the factions to just take part in the competition. So just to summarize, it is really political now, and the current crisis and this decision is the result of the previous selection procedures that are not good and only produced political appointees, basically, or almost only. And by the way, we also have, and I'll finish with this, but we also have a good counterexample when President Poroshenko, when he was supposed to appoint he was appointing 2 members by his quota, he created a very good selection commission. The procedure was not written out, but the commission was good. There was Hanna Sukhotska, who is now the honorary member of the honorary president of the Venice Commission, and there were reputable representatives of the civil society. And then he appointed Mr. Holovati and Mr. Lemak as judges of the Constitutional Court, who were the only 2 judges who wrote dissenting opinions in this notorious case. So we already have proof in our experience that if you have at least a good competition commission with the international experts that really does a competition and it's not faking it, then we have a very different result from what we have otherwise. Thank you.
Very interesting. Ekka.
Sure, I'll just add one element to what Mikhailo mentioned and take up the second part of the question. When we think about the judicial reforms and then anything that needs to deliver relatively in the short term, we would hope some results, again, for the citizens and parties to the conflict or the dispute, so to say, in the judiciary. Parallel track of action on the change of the legislative framework is needed. Procedural laws, codes of criminal code that be, or code of procedures, or in civil and administrative, because what we face in Ukraine is the legislative framework, which is extremely conducive for manipulative interpretations or stalling the processes, even when it comes to the hearings in the judiciary. And that becomes, even for good judges, an obstacle for proceeding effectively with the processes. And we see that in HACC, that deficiencies and very serious deficiencies of the Code of Criminal Procedures, for example, is becoming an obstacle for the High Court, Anti-Corruption Court, to be more effective in delivering the justice on the cases that otherwise could have been more efficiently dealt with under the premise of fair justice and that good consideration of the cases. Now, when it comes to the EU and then what could be done in this regard, I'm actually much more confident to speak about what else EU is doing, and it's much more than anything that could be related with conditionalities. And that's an actual assistance to the Ukrainian partners in building up the institutions, procedures, frameworks, and development of the human resources. So when we speak about the young institutions as they are in anti-corruption field that had to be built from the scratch, a lot of effort was directed exactly in that direction. Embedment experts, providing technical assistance, development of the human resource. And quite frankly, an important element of that was even IT development of these institutions, because what EU has learned as a lesson, perhaps in modern times now, that apart from the procedures and human resource development, in the judicial era in which we are, tools that electronic tools bring for the application of those rules need to be part of the reform and change. For instance, now already in this year, there will be full operationalization of completely electronic e-case management system for NABU, SAPO, and High Anti-Corruption Court, which would mean that in this country, for the first time in law enforcement, in the criminal justice system, it will be completely digital, investigative, prosecutorial, and then pre-trial stage of case considerations in the courts, which brings an upscale 10 times, if not more, quantitatively of the efficiency of the process, but even more so, complete change of the mindset, how you deal with the processes like that, how transparent you need to be, and how reassuring that is ultimately for the transparency and integrity of the processes. And this is already happening in this regard. Prozoro system, not only with the procurements, over the past year or two, we've helped, for example, development of the modules and all the procedures related to electronic privatization processes, so to say, together with the Prozoro sales as a system. So based on that, small-scale privatization of central as well as local administration properties, leasing of those properties, all happening through the electronic auctioning system. And there are already figures how much state has generated income out of that, but more than that, it's the change of the mindset. I believe in figures, I believe in stats. More income for the state is always very important, but important is the mindset change as well, how the state institutions are operating, how businesses are trusting that they can be part of the procurement processes, part of the privatization processes, bid honestly, and then count on integrity of the processes. And that's transformational. It's what happens out of the change of the mindset that is extremely important. And that's what we are delivering with the help that we are providing to our counterparts and our partners here, I would say, more rather than counterparts. So that's an enormous part of investment from the side of the EU, from the member states. In the case of our project, it's the government of Denmark that is an integral part of that assistance, not only as an implementer, but as a co-founder and donor of the program as well, just as an example.
Great, Ekka, thank you very much. We've got time for just one more question. We're starting to run out of time. If Konstantin Krasovsky is there, please unmute and ask the question, but I urge you to be brief. Thank you.
Thank you, John. But I already, I wanted only comments, not the question. And Mikhail already mentioned this procedure that President Poroshenko did for the selection of the constitution judges, and it was a good result for this. But I also want to mention that it was practically the same procedure for the Rada, but because Rada is a political body, it's decided themselves on the second hearing that it will be political selection of the judges. And what my comment was, my comment is, additional comment is about the not to have the simple decisions in constitutional court. The crisis is very deep, and if we raise the quorum for constitutional court, we will have some other problems when the parliament will decide something completely unconstitutional, or president will decide something unconstitutional. We will lose this some final barriers for that. Sorry, this is my comment. Thank you.
Konstantin, thank you very much. To finish up, we've got three minutes left. I'd like to ask both speakers what they think. Are we going to find a relatively quick way out of this crisis, or do you think we're headed for a longer-term political crisis?
Sure. I was just looking to, I wanted to share our analysis, the Euro's analysis on the constitutional crisis, where all these pros and cons and risks are pointed out. I as soon as I finish, I'll get it. I hope. And yes, it starts with the statement that there's no easy and quick and sustainable solution. So we have to combine, and we're only now to find something that is less or least risky, and it's not politically, it will not be kind of a savior or magic wand or a silver bullet that the president or whoever else can come and win points very quickly in doing so. It's just out of it's simply not possible now. So yes, there are ways out. The main issue to deal with the Constitutional Court is to again, the competitive selection, the real one. We have to rebuild the anti-corruption infrastructure, and by all means, we have to get the judicial reform done this time. Otherwise, yeah, we're in big trouble. Thank you. Okay. But I firmly believe that we all, if we all engage in that, it's doable. It is doable.
Ekka, you referred to Ukraine being at this crossroads. I just wonder how big you see this crossroads being, and how long it's going to take for Ukraine to
I mean, part of what the crossroad means that it's really wide open, right? I mean, there are different options. It's not just one way forward or it's one way backwards. So it is a crossroads where decisions that will be made now will define what it will be, the future of Ukraine. And I believe that there are very good chances of overcoming this crisis in the way that Ukraine can come out stronger out of that crisis. Because if you manage to do that, it's an inevitable resolution of going through the crisis like that, as it is now when it comes to the constitutional crisis. Good factors that needs to be mentioned is that even though Ukrainian society is tired, perhaps, is fatigued with the crisis, with economy, with COVID, with all of that, it has determination and commitment that is still there to make the best out of the opportunities of the future of the country, Ukraine. They are ready to be together with Ukrainian political class to fight this fight. What is needed is a dialogue that is effective and creative of bringing them back in terms of understanding the pivotal issues, recommitting, so to say, in an open way to those solutions. And part of how you can achieve that is to be brave enough on your own side when it comes to the decisions, that it's not halfway through decisions, but decisions that are opening way for more ambitious future in betterment of the country, rather than compromising on the halfway through decisions that could look good enough for now, but ultimately will only lead to the backsliding. So I opt for the first option, for better and more ambitious future in that regard. I see that factors, all the prerequisites for that are there. I don't sugarcoat the situation. It's a challenging situation indeed, but it's not the one that Ukraine cannot overcome if the consolidation of efforts will be taking place.
Super. Thank you for injecting that note of optimism at the end. Ekka, I seem to remember we used to talk about the glass being half full or half empty. We have to see this other perspective, and of course there are major opportunities there as well for Ukraine. I want to wrap up now because we're just a minute over time. A huge thank you to you, Ekka, and to Mikhailo for joining us today, for sharing your thoughts with us. This has been a valuable discussion for us, I believe, for all participants. Thank you to those who put their questions. Apologies to those who I didn't get to. We've just simply run out of time. I would like to thank in particular Arisa Lutsevich and Anna Morgan for their great work in setting up this session today, and hope to see you again soon.